Here in America, work is in trouble. We've offshored our manufacturing, sent away good jobs, and lost so much ability to make things. American Giant is a company that's pushing back against this tide. They make high-quality clothing, sweatshirts, jeans, dresses, jackets, and so much more right here in the USA. Visit American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order when you use code STAPLE20 at checkout. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com, promo code STAPLE20.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's jump on in. Today, we're going to sit down with the founder, engineer, and creator of the NeuFit, or Neubie. What is a Neubie? A Neubie is short for Neuro Bioelectric Stimulator. The Neubie device is completely different from probably any other E-Stim technology that you've heard of or experienced, and it optimizes patients' neurological functions to help them heal faster, recover faster, and get back to pre-injury functionality faster. This is really important, using the body's natural healing mechanisms. This technology is in perfect alignment with the podcast because it is revigorating and doubling down that we are an electric body. We are batteries. And to optimize healing and to optimize performance, let's embrace this fact. And so that's what this technology does. And whether you're struggling with MS, with the degradation of the myelin sheath, and you want to regain muscle mass and control of your body and strength and poise, or you're somebody that is in the NFL combine and you're looking to optimize your state of play, this technology is using that complete spectrum of people who want to feel better, whatever they're struggling with. So let's jump on in.
Welcome to the Beautifully Broken podcast. I'm your host, Freddie Kimmel, and on this show we explore the survivor's journey, practitioners making a difference, and the therapeutic treatments and transformational technology that allow the body to heal itself. Witness the inspiration we gain by navigating the human experience with grace, humility, and a healthy dose of mistakes. Because part of being human is being beautifully broken.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Beautifully Broken podcast. I am here with my good friend, Garrett Salpeter. How are you doing today?
Freddie, I'm wonderful. I'm so happy to be on the show.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. We've been in the Austin container for a little bit.
That's right. That's right.
How long have you been in Austin?
Ooh, almost 15 years.
Wow.
Even before it was cool.
Oh, my goodness.
Just kidding. It was cool then, but no, before the most recent rush, at least.
I have to say, you're part of the equation that makes Austin very special. People ask me, they're like, why did you move to Austin with everybody else? And I say it's kind of like being on Haight-Ashbury with the Grateful Dead before you knew what was happening, but from a health container. It's like everybody that's got a wellness idea or technology in the wellness space, it's incredible that you can kind of drive to NeuFit or ARX or Ocean Lab or Kuya and just go talk with all these creators. It's wild.
So I half jokingly say that, Austin really did contribute to the birth of NeuFit, because I don't know if there's any other place where people would come and pay for a 22-year-old version of me to shock them with older electrical stimulation technology, that different things that I was using and experimenting with earlier on in my journey. That was now 13, 14 something years ago. But I do think that the open-mindedness and kind of health-oriented culture here certainly was supportive and helpful to me and the birth of NeuFit.
Yeah, and it's really, you can feel the energy. Now it's ramping up, and it feels like a little bit of a magnet. Now, you mentioned the word NeuFit, so you need to tell the audience, what's NeuFit?
Yes. So NeuFit is neurological fitness. And the reason that we came to that name is because I believe that working with the nervous system is the most powerful and transformative way to help people recover from injury, reverse chronic pain, optimize their health, and restore physical function, all these different things that we're working with. And it's so interesting that sometimes we'll go into a deep conversation about helping an athlete recover from sports injuries, from an AC separation or a sprained ankle, et cetera. And then we'll talk about helping someone who's had chronic pain for years and years, maybe like CRPS or something like that is just debilitating. And then we'll talk about helping a stroke patient or an MS patient get out of a wheelchair. And then we'll talk about helping someone optimize their workouts and build bigger biceps with fewer reps. And you think like, how can you work through all these different things? Like, are you just talking out of God knows where? But the common thread throughout all of those applications is the nervous system, because the nervous system controls how we heal. It controls whether we do or don't use our muscles properly to support the body as it heals. It controls the delivery or not of blood and raw materials and resources to help with the healing process. It controls certainly pain and affect and our emotional state. And I mean, of course, all the organs, digestive, elimination, reproductive organs, our heart rate and blood pressure. The nervous system controls everything. And so we wanted to put that front and center, because I believe that if you get neurologically fit, you're going to be able to achieve all these other goals that you wish to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to unpack there. And one thing that I like, there's a synergy of many of the technologies that I love and am drawn to are that they work with the electrical body, the energy body. And can you describe how NeuFit uses current or energy to create change in the human tissue?
Yes. So there's two parts to this, at least in terms of how I look at it in the frameworks that we use. So
Right.
There's kind of the more rigorous neuroscience, and then there's the kind of energetic part, which is rigorous neuroscience. Maybe that's not the right word. Maybe it's to say it's the nerves, like the axons, the electrical signals, and then it's the perineural as in like the scaffolding, like the myelin, the sheath around the nerves, that system that doesn't conduct necessarily with the same on-off signals, but it has an electrical bias that can create slower moving fields. So it's like a conductive wire and then a semiconductor type of materials. So there's different kind of properties electronically. So what we're probably best known for is these wow moments that we create with patients, where someone will come in with some sort of shoulder pain. They won't be able to lift their arm past, say, 30 degrees. And then all of a sudden, we do our treatment, we scan around on the body and find where their nervous system and their brain are guarding, protecting, inhibiting, where they have the hypersensitivity that could lead to chronic pain down the road. We find where those are neurologically, we stimulate those areas, and after an 8 or 10 minute treatment, all of a sudden they can lift their arm up overhead. And when that happens, one, it's amazing. I mean, that never gets old, right? That is just so freaking cool to see that all the time. And thankfully, we see it often here, and the clinics that have our device certainly see it on a regular basis there too. But the cool thing about that is that it shows the power of the nervous system and neurological function and that neurological response to injury and trauma, because in that 8 to 10 minute treatment time, we know without a shadow of a doubt, it is not enough time for a ligament to heal, for a nerve to regenerate, for any bodily tissues to repair, rebuild, etc. So we know what's happening is a functional change. We know, in fact, that person had that ability to lift their arm up. They were just blocking themselves from doing it. So we didn't actually give them anything. We didn't give them anything new. All it was the opportunity to tap into some ability that they had already lying dormant there. So this speaks to how our brains and nervous systems, a big part of how they work, because our brains are oriented towards survival and protection. Our brains want to make sure that we live to see tomorrow, and they're willing to sacrifice performance. Our brains want to save energy in case there's a famine tomorrow. Our brains don't want to have us move too fast or lift too much weight or stretch too far, because we could get injured and then we're vulnerable to being eaten, right? According to these evolutionarily older parts of the brain. And so our brains limit us, and through this process, that's one of the things that we're doing, is looking at that function, identifying where the brain is imposing that limitation and giving that individual a chance to work through that. So we often see functional changes by addressing that guarding and protection, that neurological response to injury and trauma. And then when we talk about the energetic effects on healing and tissue, for example, so the device is called the Neubie, for Neuro Bioelectric device, that Neuro Bioelectric stimulator. And one of the unique things about it is that it's direct current as opposed to alternating current. And so there's a really interesting history here, because direct current, the benefits have been known for decades, but it's also a case where the baby was thrown out with the bathwater, where historically, if you were going to get direct current into the body, once you got to high enough therapeutic levels, it would literally burn the skin. And so it was just cast aside, ignored literally for decades.
Can I ask just the mechanics of that? Because the current isn't alternating. And so literally there's a heating of like protons in the skin and you get a warming of the tissue.
Exactly. Yeah, you get ions. So you get positive charged ions will accumulate around the negative electrode and vice versa. Negative charged particles, electrons around the positive. And you get that ion accumulation historically with direct current. And so that essentially creates resistance, which leads to heat dissipation, which leads to the burning of the skin. And so part of what we were able to do was find ways to get direct current into the body without burning the skin. So we get the comfort of alternating current, but the physiological benefit of direct current. And one of the effects of that is that when you get this direct current electric field gradient, it actually influences the cells that control healing and regeneration of bone, muscle, connective tissue, and nerves. It'll stimulate them to work better, to line up, to accelerate their function, and to do a better job, to work faster and more significantly, more completely. So there's these short-term functional effects, but then there's also these longer-term effects on healing and structure. And then there's even kind of further into that energetic realm, there are specific frequencies that we can use on here. And so there's a whole body of work called frequency-specific microcurrent, which is analogous to what you're doing with the amp coil. And I know you've covered that, in various episodes of this podcast. And I'll tell everyone publicly, I use the amp coil and I love it, right?
So, all right.
And we have a version of that on here where we're using frequency-specific microcurrent. And it's the same sort of thing where in previous episodes, you've talked about the resonance and frequencies and things like that.
All the time. I mean, probably 13 to 14 episodes dedicated to different type of sound therapy, bioresonance, single tone frequency. Obviously, Carol, frequency-specific microcurrent will often send two different frequencies at the same time, and there's a little magic that happens in the middle. So it's lots of conversation in that frequency container and lots of nuance in there, right? They're all a little bit different.
Yeah, for sure. Then the way I like to describe it, and this, you may have likely to have even better metaphors. The way I like to describe it when I'm talking to people is to say, look, if I have my car key and I go out and hit the unlock button in the parking lot, it unlocks my car. It doesn't unlock yours, doesn't unlock the one beside it, the one behind it. It only unlocks mine because that frequency of that signal resonates with my car. So if we use these particular frequencies, they can resonate. I'm trying to heal a tendon or, we're doing a lot of work in physical therapies, pain, musculoskeletal care, helping people restore function, things like that. So if I'm trying to help someone accelerate the healing of their tendon, for example, then choosing the frequencies that will specifically, just like my key can specifically send that energy to my car, if I can specifically send more energy preferentially into that tendon, that has a chance to help deliver more energy there, possibly help that heal.
Yeah. So I've used the NeuFit a lot at this point and had great results with it. I could see where an outside user would say, well, I've done a similar unit. I picked up a TENS unit and I had these sticky pads that went on like my lower back and they helped alleviate pain. What's the difference in a unit like for the functionality of how that's working?
So there's a few differences. Part of it is the type of signal. We'll talk about that. Part of it is the power level, certainly. And then part of it is the methodology, and they're all interrelated. So first, in terms of the signal, I mentioned this is direct current. Virtually everything else that's out there in the world is alternating current. So all the TENS units, the ones you can get at Walgreens, the ones that most of the physical therapists, chiropractors, athletic trainers have, virtually all of them are alternating current. And while that does deliver energy into the body and has some benefit, it also has a fairly low ceiling on what you can accomplish with that for two reasons. One is you don't get any of that net electric field that's going to influence tissue healing. So you're missing out on that benefit that you only get with direct current. And the other is the functional. So the first one with the electric field gradients is more related to structural tissue healing, more about the hardware. The other has to do with the software or the function. And that is that when you have an alternating current signal, it's basically going back and forth, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative. And that is actually going to be interpreted inside the nervous system as a signal of agonist, antagonist, agonist, antagonist. So it's like the bicep and tricep or the quad and the hamstring fighting against each other.
Correct.
And that is essentially training the body to move as if you were driving your car, hitting the throttle and the brake pedal at the same time. And that is a recipe for nothing good. At the very least, you're wasting energy to overcome the extra friction on the brake. At worst, you're causing damage, extra wear and tear, et cetera. So We want to be pliable. We want muscles to be able to lengthen to accommodate movement and absorb force and act like shock absorbers rather than fighting against each other and stiffening up. So that's more likely to break but not bend. We want to bend but not break.
Right.
And so you're limited on what you can accomplish with alternating current devices. With ours, with the Neubie, there's some additional sophistication in terms of the shape of the waveform. So for example, it's an exponential rise and fall engineered to mimic as closely as possible how charges move across neurological membranes. So if anyone's ever heard of like sodium potassium pumps, for example, that's how charges move in the nervous system to send those action potentials and fire those signals. So this is meant to mimic that as closely as possible. And there's some other kind of engineering, waveform features of the Neubie and things like that. But, essentially direct current versus alternating current is one of the main differences. The next is certainly the power output level. So this device, for example, is the highest classification permitted by the FDA. So here in the United States, the FDA is the governing body that regulates medical devices and drugs. And this one is cleared for the greatest amount of medical uses and different things that you can do. It's the highest power level. So with great power comes great responsibility or regulation.
Yeah.
And so there's more regulations around it. So you can't just go buy this at Walgreens. You have to either have, your doctor or your physical therapist or someone write a prescription if you're going to get one of these, or if you go to use it, it'll be either in a physical therapy clinic or in a facility where there's a medical director or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I had to add just to give people scope, because if you're sitting at home and you're not watching this live, beautifully recorded interview, then just to give an idea of what this is like, much bigger, more powerful, more bells and whistles. I've used the TENS unit, and then I've used the NeuFit, and I've used them on my quads and like my butt. One thing I said, everybody in the NeuFit team has like an incredible butt. Like everybody in your office, you must hire this way. But obviously, it really does work to develop not only functionality, but how the body looks. Like I've already had people stop me in the ARX workout I went to on Sunday. They were like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Well, I got some new tools."
Because they were looking at your butt or what?
They were looking at my butt. Yeah. And so that is like one experience I've had, even like a couple sessions. Like I worked with Taylor, right, in the office when I first started, even a couple sessions, and we like had worked on my scar tissue, my belly, where I had all my surgeries. And he was like, "Wow, your abs are like," it was like 2 sessions. And now I didn't do anything to shed body fat or anything, but I had activated the muscle, which was dormant underneath this little bit of adipose belly fat, and everything was just activated in a very, very short amount of time. So the results that I've seen off this have been like incredible. I continue to prophesize it to other people. But if you go online and you start looking for bodybuilders in the space, like people who are using this to actually greatly change their physique without having to do an incredible load of weight. That's the thing. I was working with a 25-pound kettlebell, but when we did my glutes, medial glutes, hamstrings, and quads, and we turned the strength up, it was hard to get through that range of motion. Can you kind of talk me through what's happening when we do something like that?
Yeah. So perfect segue. There's actually 2 studies that we've done now at the University of South Florida in Tampa in their exercise physiology lab. And they have a really, really good lab looking at muscle hypertrophy. So they are dialed in. I actually have an episode on our podcast with the professor there, Dr. Sam Buckner, where he describes the physiology of muscle hypertrophy. And I mentioned there were 2 studies. So we looked at comparing the Neubie with no external load, so like just having the pads on and doing bicep curls with no weight at all, versus 75% of 1 rep max. So like what you could do, 8 to 10 reps with, something like that. Yeah, comparing those 2, comparing them acutely, like what happens just after 1 session, and then over the course of a 6 to 8 week training cycle in terms of muscle growth. So acutely, and some of what you noticed actually in just those first couple sessions, it's a very similar effect that happens with the Neubie compared to using, say, 75% of 1 rep max. So in that study, that one was looking at bicep curls. And they looked at a few things. They looked at fatigue, because that is one of the important things that you need for hypertrophy. You need to make sure you're fatiguing enough motor units and muscle fibers. They looked at soreness afterwards, which is not necessary, but is an interesting marker to look at. And they looked with an ultrasound So not like an ultrasound used for treatment, but one they use for imaging. Like if you look at a pregnant mother's belly with an ultrasound, you can see the baby inside. Looking at the muscle with ultrasound. So they looked and they actually saw muscle cell swelling, which means the blood plasma, the fluid that's around floating in the extracellular space. So just kind of floating around in the body, in the muscle area. They saw that a greater amount of that was pulled inside the muscle cell. That's muscle cell swelling. That's when we say we get the pump.
Yeah.
That's what's happening. And that's a precursor to hypertrophy because blood plasma, we have our red blood cells in blood, right? We have our red blood cells that carry oxygen. Blood plasma is everything else, including a lot of proteins. So if the muscle cells are taking in more blood plasma, that is good. That means they're soaking up nutrients that they're going to then use in their subsequent repair and rebuilding process. So we saw significant muscle cell swelling after using the Neubie, approximately the same as traditional high resistance exercise, traditional weightlifting. And that speaks to some of what you're experiencing with the pump, where the muscles will be more visibly larger for a few days because that swelling will typically last, a couple of days. And it speaks to the fact that even without any weight at all, we're getting similar levels of muscle recruitment, similar levels of challenge and load on the muscle as if you were lifting weights and creating that same type of effect. So then we said, okay, let's look at what happens over a full training cycle. And so this study, actually, it got accepted for publication, but it's not out yet. So I don't know if I can share all the details, but sure. I can high level overview. This was looking at the legs with knee extensions. So knee extension is you're kicking out, straightening the leg against resistance. So one leg had the Neubie with no weight at all. The other one, I think it was 75% of one rep, approximately the same weight on the other leg. And then they compared over that full training cycles, something in the 6 to 8 week range, what happened with muscle growth. And I can't share all the details, but spoiler alert it was about the same between using the Neubie with no weight at all and traditional resistance exercise. So that speaks to the fact that you can increase muscle recruitment and muscle activation. You can get as much muscle activation as if you're lifting weights, but without the risks of injury because you're not putting as much load or strain on your joints. And if you're an athlete and you need to experience those loads and strains on your joints, you still can. But sometimes if you're in season, this can be a good way to do it. Or if you're trying to come back from an injury, say you're trying to come back from a spine injury and you want to get a maximum strength stimulus on your lower body, you're not going to want to squat heavy or deadlift heavy because you don't want to re-injure your back. But you can put these electrodes on your glutes, on your hamstrings, on your quads, and you can do body weight or use a quarter to a third of what you might normally use and get as much stimulation on those muscles and still get that type of stimulus to maintain or build strength.
Yeah, it's incredible. I just was watching my Buffalo Bills yesterday and they lost, a really sad loss to the Jets, and probably was like the last, they were about to drive down the field the last minute and a half.
A couple of Jets guys have been using the Neubie in the offseason at a athletics rehab in Miami.
We got to get Josh Allen on it.
I know, we do.
He got whacked in his arm and everybody gasped in the audience because he was kept holding his elbow in his arm. But I've read, when I started to explore current and direct frequency specific microcurrent and stuff, this is years ago that I had heard about, was it Terrell Owens making it back into the Super Bowl after a patellar tendon tear?
He had a surgery on his ankle. I think it was a fibula. He had a rod inserted in his ankle, something like that. But Carol McMakin, the doctor who's now this champion of frequency-specific microcurrent, she went and worked with him after the surgery. And yeah, with frequency-specific microcurrent was a big, big factor in that recovery because it got the swelling down faster. It helped everything heal. And yeah, he got back surprisingly quickly. It was like 2005, 6 Super Bowl.
He made it into the Super Bowl, and it was in the fall. The injury was in the fall. And then you've had a bunch of NFL players using this, probably just not NFL, but I just look at the demands that those guys face. And then, like you're saying, the ability to train and get a pump so you're supplying blood flow to a sore joint, but without hyper loading it with all this weight that you might not need in season training.
Yeah, I think it's a really good way to balance. I mean, there's all these different demands on an athlete when you're talking about games, practices, workouts, travel, sleep, other personal stressors, nutrition, dehydration. I mean, all this stuff you have to balance. It can be a difficult challenge. I mean, there's people who devote their whole careers to they're strength coaches and athletic trainers, and then people in academia who have their PhDs in exercise science who devote their careers to trying to answer this question of how can we get them the right dose at the right time. So it's the right thing, the right amount. It's like dosing exercise is sort of like dosing a prescription drug. You need to have the right one. You need to have it in the right amount. You need to do it at the right time. You need to be aware of how it interacts with other inputs. And there's a lot that goes to it. It's a lot more variables than one might think.
Yeah. Also, we're talking a lot about sports performance and athletics. I have had people in my immediate community and network reach out and have great testimonials that had been going through MS and different neurological conditions and there's one woman in particular who was a majority of her time was in a wheelchair. And I think she did a demo or one session. She's like, my feet are moving. She had movement in her feet. So it was pretty instant. Can you talk about how, we have this, again, for people at home, we have MS, which is multiple components. There's very different variations. There's actually not an MS disease. It's just a symptom set. We get lesions on the brain. There's been some studies that have come out lately linking it to Lyme disease, different spirochete bacteria, Epstein-Barr, you name it. But we have this degradation in the myelin sheath in the body. So could you explain from your understanding MS and why the nerves are no longer firing to which we want them to? And then why do people get benefit with the NeuFit?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about this is all our conversation about athletes is not going to be lost, because in order to recover from MS, one of the things that we tell people is that you have to think of yourself as an athlete. You may not be going out and trying to score a touchdown, but you are going to have to adopt the mindset of an athlete to be able to train and recover and adapt and tap into your body's ability to create whatever neuroplastic changes. It takes a lot of inputs and a lot of dedication and consistency to harness the power of neuroplasticity. And that's ultimately going to be our path out. But what is MS? Ultimately, like you said, it's a set of symptoms. It's a disease state in which people have nerve damage in the brain or in the spinal cord. So it can be damage in different places. It's commonly blamed on the immune system as an autoimmune condition where the immune system excess goes overboard and starts attacking the body's own nervous system tissue. And that, it could be for a variety of reasons that we don't necessarily deal with. But
well, that'll be another episode.
Yeah.
Let's go down there later.
But the point is that it leads to this damage. And we work a lot with Dr. Terry Wahls. Do you know the Wahls protocol, or do you know Dr. Wahls?
Done it. Loved it.
Awesome.
Found benefit.
Yeah. So Dr. Wahls, wonderful. I'll give Dr. Wahls for anyone listening if you don't know.
I forgot that she used a certain type of current delivery, because I always think about her diet.
Yeah.
She had the high polyphenol diet, very clean food. I mean, she ate whole foods with a lot of good polyphenols in there.
Yeah. So she has this Wahls protocol, this lifestyle. So it's basically like a paleo plus diet with some other lifestyle interventions and strategies. And so she uses this with people to help them stop the progression of their MS. And she's done studies that shows this can be as effective as immune suppressing drugs, of course, without the side effects. It can also be used in combination with drugs. There's different ways. It doesn't have to be an either or proposition, but for many people, they've been able to use this to help themselves. So Dr. Wahls, actually, just a little aside since you mentioned that. So she did electrical stimulation during her personal experience with MS, which she still has, but she was in a wheelchair in like 2005, 2006. And she started experimenting with the Wahls protocol and was able to start slowing down her progression of MS, start slowing down the decline. And then she wanted to restore function. So she was using older versions of electrical stimulation, like souped up TENS units. This is long before she and I ever met, before the Neubie or anything like that. So she literally would have it on for 10 to 12 hours per day. So she'd have it on while she's at her desk reading. She'd have it on while she's driving to and from work. Or I don't even know if she was driving herself, she had to be driven around, but she'd have it on literally while she was working all day.
Wow.
And that was essentially what it took for her to get back. And it's an example of the type of dedication that it takes. But part of why we really like working with her is that the Wahls protocol does help people stop the decline. It seals off against further damage. And that's a prerequisite. That's the first thing we need to do.
There's some lifestyle changes is what I'm hearing.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So it's like paleo plus diet, things that are not going to cause any excessive immune activity. And then she has other strategies, tips and tricks as well. But I don't know if tips and tricks might sound a little too simplifying. But
Tips and tricks for MS. Yes.
yeah. So once you stop the progression of MS, then the question becomes, well, that's great, but what can I do to restore the function that I've lost? If I'm in a wheelchair or something, what, is it possible for me to regain feeling in my feet, regain movement in my feet, regain my autonomy? Can I get my driver's license back? Can I work again? I don't know. So that's where we come in and we say, okay, if you are going to make these improvements, neuroplasticity is the answer. Neuroplasticity describes how our nervous systems adapt to the inputs of our environment and how we heal from neurological injury or damage. So as children, we come in, we're hardwired with some reflexes and different things, but essentially we're blank slates, right? We don't come in speaking or understanding any language. If we grow up here in the US, we likely will understand English or Spanish. If we grow up in China, we're going to Mandarin it because we're going to adapt to what we hear and what we experience. And so neuroplasticity essentially describes that. It takes a lot of input to drive neuroplastic changes, especially as we get older, where it's going to take a lot of input. So the way that we like to describe this is to say, you do have to treat yourself like an athlete because it's going to take hundreds of thousands of repetitions of a movement in order to help the brain understand that, yes, this pathway that controls this movement is important. It is worth investing long-term, the energy, the resources, the raw materials to rebuild and maintain that pathway. Because remember, the brain is oriented towards survival and protection. So if we're not using something, a muscle, a nerve pathway, or other tissues, yeah, exactly. It's not worth the energy to maintain that because there could be a famine tomorrow. We don't want to waste energy. So we have to create a lot of input in that specific pathway if we want the brain to understand that it has to build that back up or rebuild, repair, regenerate anything in that area. So there's a few parts to that. One is we have to have our health bases taken care of. So there's enough energy to meet the basic survival needs for today, and then to have a surplus left over to invest. And then where do we invest it? Well, we're going to invest it in the areas that are being used the most. And that's where we need all these thousands and thousands and thousands of repetitions. And so thinking like an athlete means, look, it's going to take hours a day of training, not just one day, not just for 1 week, but for months and months and months. That's how athletes train to become the best in the world. And they train and then they don't stay out drinking till 2 a.m. because that could undo all the benefits. So they have to support that training. So it takes the discipline, the diligence inside the, physical therapy clinic or inside the gym and then outside of it. But there's this massive amount of work that has to be done. And where we come in with our strategies and our technologies, we help people get there faster. It's like if we were going from Austin to Los Angeles, or maybe going from Los Angeles to Austin, like everyone moved during the pandemic. So if you have that distance to cover, it's a fixed distance, right? It's a far distance, but you have choices in how you choose to cover that distance. You could walk, you could ride a horse, or you could fly an airplane. And with technology like the Neubie, where you still have these hundreds of thousands of repetitions, you still have this amount, this body of work that you have to accumulate. We're just going to help you get there faster and more efficiently.
Yeah, it's a great example of how to harness, the bodies. Because I keep hearing this, it's like we're not doing anything different from what the body does, but we're harnessing technology and we're amplifying that signal. And maybe we're directing energy for clarity when the body has forgotten its way. Has your team been in touch with like Christina Applegate?
She got diagnosed with MS, right? I think I saw that. No. If you're listening to this, Christina, we'd love to work with you.
She's a Broadway performer as well. She's a dancer.
Oh, cool.
She has a huge, oh yeah.
I remember her from Married with Children.
Yeah.
That was her, right?
Yeah, super talented and such a, sweet human being. She was in Sweet Charity on Broadway. I have like such a soft spot in my heart when I hear a dancer. I was reading one of her interviews and said she was grieving and renegotiating the loss of her life. I was like, how do we get in touch with this girl? It's like not, because let me just say this, and I love Christina, but I love all human beings. I don't want to like put a celebrity on a pedestal, but I'll say when somebody in the public eye goes through something like that, and I read that message, just hit my heart. I was like, man, she needs to know that there's she needs to come to Austin, some profound healing available like on the regular, I thought of Dr. Wahls. I thought of my friends who are working with the new type of stem cell treatment called V cells down in Florida. I'm thinking of all the unique hyperbarics and the, all the things that we have access to here. But it should be an opportunity. I'm actually calling it in. Christina, call me. And, we'll get you hooked up. But with that, I think it's important to say that there are options, and maybe it's just we haven't flipped enough rocks. Yeah, I'm such a firm believer. I've only heard really good things. And then I'm aware of people like Dr. Wahls. Dr. Wahls, there is a Dr. Wahls as well who I've had on who deals with chronic Lyme disease. But Dr. Wahls' protocol is someone who's had great success. She's helped many, many people across the world. And like you said, she puts in the work. Like this woman, that is her life, is dedicated to keeping her mobility, keeping her strength. With that, when we look at this technology, what would someone need to do as far as, would they want to do a NeuFit session every day? Is this something like 2 to 3 times a week? Someone could find great benefit. You said Dr. Wahls needed to be on the device all day, every day when she was using this archaic forms of a TENS pad. So what's NeuFit look like in your lifestyle?
So it definitely depends on what your goals are and the situation. Dr. Wahls now uses the Neubie, and she says that in an hour or two of a structured program like we've given her now, that she probably could have accomplished the same or more as she did with 10 plus hours of her older electrical stimulation. So if you are someone who's dealing with a neurodegenerative condition like MS, it might be an ongoing thing where you're going to have to keep doing this. The use it or lose it principle applies to all of us. You don't just brush your teeth once and you're good for the next year or something. Same thing with movement. We don't just move once and we're good. Like, we have requirements. Use it or lose it definitely applies to us. If you don't use nervous system pathways, body tissues, muscle atrophy, like astronauts will have muscle atrophy in 24 hours of unloading, of being in a zero gravity environment. So we can lose it pretty quickly. It's just even more amplified for MS patients. So most commonly, they can get to a point where they do some work and they can maintain that for a period of time, but it would decline faster if they don't keep doing it. So for them, an ongoing routine, 3 to 4 days a week with the Neubie or something like that is usually manageable and also enough to be really effective and sustain progress for the long term. They could do something with it every day if they had a device at home or things like that. At the other extreme, someone who sprained their ankle or fell on their shoulder, has some sort of acute sports injury, for them, it might just be the response to that one insult, to that one injury. And once we go through our process, help them work through that, they'll be back to baseline and they can go back to doing their thing, and they may not need to come back in for that at all, or, maybe a little maintenance here and there if they re-aggravate it. But that could be kind of a one and done thing. We could talk to them about how we could help them with mobility or with strength or skill acquisition. We could, if they want to do some ongoing work, but just to get over that initial, injury or challenge, that might just be a couple sessions, and that's like a one-time thing. So that's kind of one extreme. The in-between are, longer recoveries, like for someone who's post-op, someone had an ACL repair or a disc or a laminectomy or some sort of shoulder tendon repair or something like that, or orthopedic rods, pins, screws implanted. Those are typically like a few months, but we've seen some really cool things there where we've been able to help people reach their functional milestones a lot faster, heal a lot better. And it speaks to that neurological response to injury and trauma, because surgery really is just controlled trauma. The body doesn't know that it was good that we wanted to do it. The body just knows that it was attacked. It does not like being cut open, whatever they do, being sawed apart,
Sliced
if it's a
and
bone,
diced.
or having these rods and screws and pins implanted or whatever it is. The body doesn't like that. So that the way it reacts to injury, guarding, protecting, inhibiting, shutting down areas, restricting movement, a reaction, and surgery is like that, but times 3, times 4, times 5. So to actually answer your question a roundabout way, it varies on what people are looking for. We have people who come in and they're healthy and they just want to use it, like you were talking about, to get some effects on their muscles, work on body composition, or generally feel good so that they can go out and play basketball or tennis on the weekends or go for a run without hurting themselves or anything like that. So, people will come in and train twice a week and be able to check off those boxes for their functional training. Cool thing about this is you're able to get mobility and, endurance, cardiovascular training and strength, a lot of these things all at once.
Yeah. It's funny. I was just thinking, I forgot this. I actually used this maybe like 3 years ago. My friend Lauren Sambataro, one of the biohacker babes, she bought one. And I remember she's like, I got this thing. She's like, you're going to love it. And I went over and tried it for a while. And she was like, I was like, how much is this thing? And she told me the price at the time. I'm like, you must really like this thing. She's like, it's amazing. She was blown away because she's such a, Broadway dancer, check movement specialist, really knows the body. And she was awestruck at what she could do from a training perspective in a very short amount of time without really needing weights. I think that's the other thing. It's like, you could argue that it saves you a lot of money on gym equipment.
Yeah, absolutely. You could have a home gym with this and, a few little dumbbells or bands or something. And
yeah,
my home gym is this and a red light panel and some 10-pound dumbbells. I mean,
yeah.
Just work out in my home office. Most mornings, that's what I do.
And so the other thing I just wanted to go back, you said with great power comes great responsibility. And I also believe that to be true, that the first time I used the Neubie for a little bit, I didn't know enough, and now second time around, I've been at a bunch of events with your team. I've worked with Clay, I've worked with Taylor, I've watched some videos, and I just feel like I have a better understanding. So every time I have more exposure to it, the education and the training, I get more out of it. And also, like, some people have just been phenomenal with the device. Like Lauren, she really understands it. Clay really understands it, Taylor. So how do you go about training somebody to properly do this? And is it important that they have a really good understanding on the musculature of the body? A lot of people that I've worked with were basically a physical therapist or an elite level trainer.
Yeah. So, in our office here, we've got 5 physical therapists and then people like Taylor, 5 people with personal training or exercise physiology backgrounds. He's got a master's in exercise science. And so he works, under the licensure of our physical therapists and our medical staff,
Yes.
But definitely helps for him. He had a lot of understanding of the body and the musculature and movement and everything. But he also went through our training. So we have a level 1 certification. We put our team, at our facility here, our home office is a showroom, a teaching facility, and we put our staff through the same training that physical therapists and other practitioners, in every state or even in other countries, the same training that they take when they get a device. So we have our level 1 training, and that's enough to help people become really proficient. It's the 80-20 principle. We're trying to give them the 20% of techniques and strategies and concepts that they'll need to help 80 or 90 or more % of people that come through their doors. And then we have advanced modules if they have to work on vestibular or, more MS specific or certain specialties, things like that, where they're not going to be in that level 1. But that level 1 is applying the 80-20 principle really gives people the tools that they need to help a vast, vast majority of people. So it is important that they get trained, and they have to either themselves be a licensed medical professional or be, working with one. But the good news is that we've seen with that training, we can really help people get up and running and apply really powerful neurological principles, like apply real neuroscience in daily practice in a very simplified way.
The topic of neuroplasticity has come up so much in this. Again, lots of people who listen to the podcast, we talk about the ability of access to healing in the moment starts in here, and remembering that. And it's the evolving science of self-guided neuroplasticity. Did you meet Ben Ahern's in California? He does a program called Reorigin.
Oh, you told me about it. I haven't, after you mentioned it, I looked up the website. I was intrigued, but I haven't experienced it.
He's got a great TED Talk, but it looks at, this incredible science of self-guided neuroplasticity, but it's actually speaking to my very specific, unique symptoms, and then going through certain physical movements and reminding my body that I'm safe, I'm healing in every way and every day. And to a degree, we're using something like Neubie to work along with the new patterns or remembering patterns where there is strength, and you were sending a current to remind the body that it's safe and it can move in this way. And then we're repatterning that. Do you remember? I used to know the peripheral nervous system, the nerves. I feel like we can regenerate like an inch a month.
Like a millimeter a day, something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah. So that would be 30 millimeters in a month, and an inch is about 2.5 centimeters. So yeah, that's about right.
It's close. So I wasn't totally off, but I always use that, and I'm glad I wasn't bastardizing it. I use that range just to remind people, like, think about the time it takes for your whole peripheral nervous system to regenerate. And we've got this chance, like starting at today, we're 11/7, right? November 7th. Where do you want to be next year? Because a lot of times we don't think about that. We think about these very short-term endeavors. I got a pain in my knee. I've always got a sore back, whatever my thing is. And we don't think where we want to be in a calendar year. And so if you really wanted to double down and have like the best year of your life, we can start to place value, real, like discernible value on something like, you can go work with a trainer and be like, find one with a NeuFit for a while. Or you have the access to the funds and you're like, I'm going to get a NeuFit. I'm going to have like the best calendar year of my life and be like the most peak possible expression I've ever known.
Amen. I'm inspired.
Why are we not all doing this? I keep seeing all the things that are going on in the world. And well, the world. We see the world through our phone. It's an askew view. But I feel like most of the problems that we have, if we've just got up when we really push something heavy and we were to add like 6 to 10 pounds of muscle mass, that we would start to solve some of these things that we're looking for these really weird solutions for.
That's true. I think that a lot of times, this is the beauty of so many episodes on your podcast, the beauty of functional medicine, the beauty of real solutions, that oftentimes the best solutions are really the most simple ones, are really about getting back to the fundamentals. If you're talking about basketball, dribbling and free throws, if you're talking about football, blocking and tackling, hockey, puck handling, passing, the best in the world never stop doing the basics. They never stop practicing the fundamentals. They're never too good to work on their wrist shot or in hockey or their jump shot or whatever. So you can go a long, long, long way with the basics and working to master the basics. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be complicated. And I like that perspective because I think that you can choose a couple of simple things, focus on them, and continue to work on the mastery of those simple things and get much further in a year or whatever period of time than you otherwise would if you were kind of bouncing around.
Yeah, I think the quote I was wrestling with last week was like, we overestimate what we can do in a day, and we greatly underestimate what we can do in a year.
Mm-hmm. The one I've heard is we overestimate what we can do in a year, but we underestimate what we can do in 3 years. Or I've heard 3 years, I've heard 10 years. But yeah, same thing.
Yeah. I always tell people, challenge yourself. Stay curious about what you think can happen with your body, because I had to hear these stories, of people with these wild, wild recoveries from late stage chronic illness, just not supposed to happen. And they're like, I'm good. It's possible. So I like those. It gives us hope. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got to interrupt the show because we have a very special offer from the NeuFit team and Garrett. They provided a very generous discount on the NeuFit technology to the Beautifully Broken audience. So you can find that link to schedule a call with the team at beautifully.broken.world in the store. Just click the link for NeuFit. You can also go to neu.fit/Freddie to explore the discount and schedule a call with a team member. This would be something where you could reach out to your local physical therapist, your personal trainer, anybody who is your wellness guide and say, I want to start using this technology in my home. We're going to jump back into the show, and I hope you're enjoying this interview just as much as I am. How did you get into this? Did you just stumble upon it? What's like the bird's eye view origin story of your pain to power scenario?
So I feel very blessed and fortunate to have found what I'm so passionate about and what I feel called to do really at a young age. I played ice hockey in college, and I was never at risk of making the NHL, but I loved it and I poured everything I had into it. And I had injuries along the way, and I was really frustrated with traditional physical therapy and orthopedic medicine. And then I had an injury towards the end of my time in college where I was supposed to have surgery for some torn ligaments, supposed to be out for 3 or 4 months. And I met a doctor who was doing functional neurology and worked with him. And we did 2 things. One was functional neurology, where instead of just looking at just being enamored with the tissue or the hardware, we looked at the software, we looked at the nervous system, that neurological response to injury and trauma. We looked at how the muscles around that injured area were not functioning and not supporting the area as it healed, and the other associations with the nervous system. And then we used an older version of direct current, more like a microcurrent, like an older thing at the time.
Like a dinosaur version of what we would,
Exactly.
so like the tractor or something.
Yeah. So using direct current and functional neurology, I was able to heal those ligaments in 2.5 weeks, avoid surgery altogether. And I mean, not only was I just so overjoyed that it worked, but I was a physics major. I was set to be, go to graduate school in engineering. And for me to find something that actually made sense from first principles was just even more amazing. And so going through that experience, I felt called to share that work with as many people as I possibly could. I had no idea at the time what it would look like, but I ended up coming down here to Austin for graduate school in engineering. So I was at the University of Texas. And while I was there, met the chiropractor for the UT football team. And I started working with him in his private practice. So I was in a 150 square foot room using older versions of electrical stimulation technology and started treating people out of it. And that's why I say that, the culture in Austin probably was really helpful, because people would be willing to come in and let a 22-year-old version of me shock them with electrodes.
That's great.
So I did that literally for 7 or 8 years. And, it grew over time. I got more and more passionate. That inspired me to go back to school for additional graduate school in neuroscience and read and study and just do everything I could to learn more and more about this. And finally, I got to the point about 7 or 8 years in where I had been waiting for other people to come out with newer technology. And, I thought I might just take that and, maybe have a few clinics around Austin. And like, that would be awesome. I'd love that for my life, for my career. And I just kept waiting. And, as things evolved, finally I got to the point where I said, gosh darn it, I just have to do this myself. And so I ended up, deciding to launch the device. Thankfully, I didn't know at the time how long and how expensive it was going to be, because I don't know if I would have done it. But I'm so glad that I did. And it's been an amazing journey now. We've had the device out for 5 years, and to see people, I mean, it's so powerful to see them get the same types of benefits that we see here in Austin, because they're able to touch and reach people that we'd never work with, right? In all these different cities, even different countries now. So to see them get these life-changing wow moments, immediately in the clinic, or help these people get out of wheelchairs or overcome chronic debilitating pain that's literally kept them bedridden and have forced them to leave school or quit their jobs or whatever. I mean, to see them get the changes, get those outcomes has been amazing to see it grow. And then also to be able to work with people who are working in different specialties, people who are specifically working with chronic pain or children or elderly population or pelvic floor issues, and being able to learn from each other in this NeuFit Nation, as we call our community of practitioners.
Yeah.
So it's been just really wonderful. And I'm, so grateful for how things have grown, and grateful to you for having me on here to talk about it too.
Oh my goodness. Of course. Well, I'm excited for what's to come. And do you have things on the drawing board, more that you want from the technology? Do you see there's an unrealized avenues of using direct current that you're still building and working on?
So we're always trying to innovate and improve on methodology, technology. I mean, every aspect of what we're doing. So yes, one of the things that we'd like to do would be widen the frequency range. So we talk about like frequency specific microcurrent and all these things. We're able to do pretty much everything that we need to with this so far, but I think there are some benefits in terms of widening that. So that's one of them. And then we've got some other things on the horizon, nothing in the immediate future as we're sitting here talking today, but
yeah,
definitely more growth and innovation in the years to come. And now I think that really this technology has helped so many people. I think the biggest opportunity is to get it in front of more people so that even more people can experience those life-changing outcomes and just get to tap into their own potential and see what really working with their nervous system can do for them.
Yeah. I think the other thing that popped up for me when you were saying that, I was listening to your flow, is that, we tend to do things for pain or dysfunction. Generally, we're trying to mute inflammation. We're trying to quiet the pain with some type of like an opioid, as opposed to try to restructure, resignal, and complement the body's natural. It is asking for something with pain. And so working with it in a different way, I hope there's more integration. And again, like you said, more education, that we start to break into other markets. And I always imagine a lot of these things that are in Austin, like these biohacking technologies, was like, let's get facilitators on these. Let's get more doctors using this. Let's put these in emergency rooms, so we can start to like shift this focus off of managing disease and illness and masking what the body's asking for and really trying to honor that signal. So, I hope there's more to come.
Do we have a moment to go down the pain rabbit hole?
Yeah.
Since you mentioned pain.
Yeah.
So pain is such an interesting phenomenon. And one of the things I love about your work and this podcast is that you are talking about the root cause. You're trying to get to the root cause. And if you go down that path and you try to get to the root cause of pain, you get to the realization that pain is always, if someone says your pain is in your head, you can say, yes, of course it is. Everyone's pain is in their head because pain is an active output signal created by the brain. It's the brain's way of saying, don't do that, change your behavior. And it's easy to understand, if someone injures their leg, if someone strains or sprains or tears a ligament in their knee or sprains their ankle or something, like stepping on that is painful because that's the brain's way of saying, ooh, stay off that. Go on your other leg. Don't load that because you don't want to like hurt it worse, or it's trying to protect or limit movement in that area. So pain is a response to perceived threat. And in that case, it's easy to see the perceived threat is an obvious physical damage. There's times where that perceived threat might be, ooh, my boss just got really mad at me because I missed a deadline. And now I'm concerned that I might lose my job, which means I can't pay my bills, which means I might get kicked out of my apartment, which means I might not be able to pay for food. Starts to activate these evolutionary, old, survival-oriented parts of the brain. And that is a perceived threat. And all of a sudden, that person's knee hurts or that person's back hurts. And they think, oh shit, now on top of this, I injured my back. But pain is a response to perceived threat. And if it's a, quote unquote, non-physical or something that we think shouldn't hurt physically, if it's something like that job stress, the brain is going to try to trigger that signal of pain to get us to change our behavior, to change our environment, to do something different. There's no, I am concerned about my job muscle in the body that where the brain can make us hurt. It's going to use a well-rehearsed, previously established pain pathway. So if that person has back pain, the brain is going to trigger pain in the back because it doesn't want to invest the energy and resources to build a new pain pathway. No, it's going to use what's already there. So there's this common misunderstanding that we have. We think pain means damage and damage means pain, but you can have pain without damage. You can have damage without pain. You can have damage that doesn't hurt either. And it's a really interesting phenomenon. And it's the reason that I like to talk about this is that for people with chronic pain, it can be a very empowering message to understand that pain is a response to perceived. Those threats can be real or imagined. And that by taking this more holistic approach, it opens up the opportunity for us to find the root cause, and certainly using the Neubie and then perhaps other lifestyle interventions, we are able, very, very often to help people with chronic pain that lingers even after the original injury has healed, or pain that seems out of proportion, like much higher than it should be given the lack of severity of an injury or some of these types of cases. So pain is a really, really interesting phenomenon. Anyone who's ever experienced pain knows that it can be also very serious and you want to get rid of it. But if you just, mask it with the opioids route, or NSAIDs, Advil, Aleve, whatever. If you're just doing those things to mask it, you're not actually getting to the root cause of that pain.
Yeah. The other thing that came up while you were saying that is just something that's so deficient from birth all the way through grade school is like emotional vocabulary. Like a lot of times people don't have the words or the index cards to express what they're feeling. There's a great book, The Body Keeps the Score, and where we will put these unprocessed emotions in joints and knees and legs. And the body, like you said, it's the nerves that fire together, wire together. So we have that signal and, we have these suppressed emotions stored throughout the body. It's like the recipe for disaster. So I would imagine using some type of like nonviolent communications, feelings and needs along with this could be really profound.
Yeah. And it's so interesting. There are times where we'll be doing our mapping process, scanning around on somebody, and they'll be like, oh my gosh, I just remembered when, this happened when I was a teenager or when I was a kid or something like that. So I think those are examples. I mean, I totally believe that to be true, that we store memories or the trauma of experiences in our body, that it's patterns of tension, that we armor ourselves as a protective mechanism, and that those armoring strategies or those patterns of tension or protection are located in the body and that we can find them. So when we do our mapping process, I think that's part of what is showing up, and that treating those can have profound effects even beyond getting out of physical pain in a joint or something like that. So
yeah,
I think there's some really cool opportunities to help people there by working on those patterns for sure.
I love it. Where do people go if they want to like explore NeuFit, the Neubie, if they want to like try a session? Do they look up a trainer in their area? Do they call you?
Best avenue is probably to go to our website, which is www.neu.fit. It's NEU, like neurological, neu.fit. And on there's links for providers if people are interested in learning more about the science or, bringing a device into their practice, their clinic, et cetera. And then there's a link for patients. And on there, one of the things is a map. So you can go and you can just zoom in and scroll around on the map, or you can type in your city, your state, your zip code, and you'll find certified practitioners near you. And if there is someone near you, please feel free to reach out to them directly. If there isn't, or you want to come see us, there's a link on there to contact our team. You can, certainly come to Austin. One interesting thing that we've done, so we talk about with MS patients or stroke or spinal cord injury or patients with these other neurological diseases or conditions or injuries, we've done quarterly boot camps here. So we have MS boot camps where patients come in from around the country for a 3-day intensive, and they do 2 sessions a day, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then a group activity at lunch. And we serve Wahls protocol compliant lunches, by the way. But
that's great.
So people will come in, and then they can either continue with a therapist in their area, or they can rent or buy a device to use at home. Sometimes it's more time and cost effective to have one at home, but we certainly encourage people, if possible, to see someone in their area to work with a skilled professional. If there isn't anyone nearby, though, please reach out to us.
Yeah, amazing. I celebrate you for doing this work and being part of solution-based mindset.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hey, it's an honor to meet a fellow solution-based mindset-oriented person.
Welcome to Austin. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to the Beautifully Broken podcast. This is our audio and visual show. This one will be on YouTube, so be sure to check it out. And we'll be back. We'll do another episode with Garrett because there's just so much to talk. I mean, we could do probably 5 episodes on the nuance of using direct current in the body and understanding that on a deep level. I do think there's high value to understanding how these things work in the body. I tend to get a better outcome when I understand what it's doing. So do a deep dive and get out and try it. I think it's a very unique experience and your butt's going to look better. So I don't know what else to say.
Look good, feel good.
Look good, feel good. Thank you for being a guest, sir.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
All right. Namaste.
Team, thank you for creating a wave of momentum that is driving season 5 of the Beautifully Broken podcast. My heart thanks you for tuning in. And if you enjoyed today's show, head over to Apple Podcasts and now Spotify. Spotify is new and you can leave a review. 5 stars if you loved it. And before you go, I have something really important I need to offer. There are 2 ways we can build this relationship. The first is to join my membership program at buymeacoffee.com/FreddySetGo. You get early access to all the podcasts, bonus episodes, discounted consults, and free webinars covering all the wellness technologies. The second is to support beautifullybroken.world. That's right, I have a brand new website and new store, beautifullybroken.world. Listed on here are all the wellness tools, supplements, educational courses, and products that I absolutely love. Most of them offer significant discounts by clicking the link or using the code. Please know that they don't cost you anything extra. And at the same time, they do support the podcast through affiliations. What's that? I just got a message from my lawyers, my internet team of lawyers. They wanted me to tell you that the information on this podcast is for educational purposes only. By listening, you agree not to use the information found here as medical advice. Do you agree? Yes, you agree. To treat any medical condition in yourself or others, always consult your own physician for any medical issues that you may be having. Finally, our closing. The world is changing. We need you at your very best. So always take the steps to be upgrading your energy, your mindset, and your heart. Remember, while life is pain, putting the fractured pieces back together is a beautiful process. I love you. I'm your host, Freddie Kimmel.
This country was built on a distinctly American work ethic. But today, work is in trouble. We've outsourced most of our manufacturing to other countries. And with that, we sent away good jobs and diminished our capability to make things. American Giant is a clothing company that's pushing back against this tide. They make a variety of high-quality clothing and activewear, like sweatshirts, jeans, dresses, jackets, and so much more. All made right here in the USA, from growing the cotton to adding the final touches. So when you buy American Giant, you create jobs for seamsters, cutters, and factory workers in towns and cities across the United States. And it's about more than an income. Jobs bring pride, purpose. They stitch people together. If all that sounds good to you, visit American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order when you use code STAPLE20 at checkout. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com with promo code STAPLE20.
At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 300 programs at asuonline.asu.edu.